I think tonight it would be good to introduce actually another meditation that we did not get to yet, and that's meditation 3 in your handout, which is called being the caring figure. So this third meditation, this meditation 3 in your handout, is another way basically of doing the field of care meditation. And for some people, it can be the most effective way to begin to enter into a field of care. But it comes at it from a different angle. In this meditation, which I'm going to lead now, we begin by recalling a moment when we were the caring figure for someone else, some other being, human or animal, when we ourselves were the caring figure for another. You following? And that can serve equally well, for example, with the other kinds of field of care that we've been doing, to access qualities, sort of loving qualities of warmth and acceptance and care and responsiveness and so forth, to access those kinds of loving qualities from our underlying awareness. It's another way to access those. So to prepare for this meditation, we're going to try to, well, what I'll ask you to do is recall a moment when you were a caring figure to another being. Like, which again, it can be a human or an animal, it could be your pet. But a moment when you were radiating warmth and care to them, or seeing them in their deep worth, or deeply listening, or rooting for them, or taking joy in them, or doing things that make them happy because you were happy for them to be happy. So try to recall a moment like that from any time in your life. Can you do that? When you were the caring figure for another. People may think of a moment with a child or with a pet, but really with any other being. So this is an alternative form really of field of care, but here now we are the caring figure. We're just remembering a moment like that. And when we recall it, and when we re-inhabit that moment, that re-inhabit means we are experiencing it like it is happening now. Then we can experience the qualities that come with that. Okay, so let's give that a try. Let's start with a little bit of abdominal breathing. So just your own natural rhythm of breathing, but this time let the abdomen expand as you inhale. And then let the expanding and contracting of the abdomen, the feeling of that, draw you into it more and more. So it's helping to really settle and ground your awareness, being drawn more and more into that feeling of the abdomen expanding and contracting with each breath. And now bring to mind a moment when you were a caring figure for someone else. And consider that moment not as a distant memory, but as happening right now. So you and the other being in that moment are present together now in that way. It is happening now. And feel the loving energy and tender qualities that come with this way of being with another. Feel all that. Not just thinking about it, but feeling it. Being with this other being in this deeply caring way. And just steep in this loving energy and its qualities. Accepting them into your whole body and heart and mind. Really steeping in them, feeling them. As you resonate with the other being in care. And notice the loving qualities that are occurring in this moment, such as warmth or acceptance or responsiveness or resonance or inner peace or inner strength or love. Or joy. And let yourself fully accept and own and embody those qualities of your caring self. And now just deeply relax into the feeling of these caring qualities and let that feeling help your heart and mind to trust and relax and just become gently, completely open like space. Just let the heart and mind become completely open like space. Just settling into the basic awareness from which these qualities come. The utter openness and simplicity of this underlying awareness. Just settling into it with this sense of utter openness and deep allowing. And letting patterns of thought and feeling just unwind or release in this utter openness. Thank you. That was good. So that you find that in your handout. Again, it's meditation 3. And for some people, that's actually the most accessible way to access these underlying qualities, these loving qualities of our underlying awareness. But in any case, in all these ways of accessing it, using different kinds of fields of care, or a caring moment, or bringing to mind someone who you're really grateful to, or bringing to mind spiritual figure, or spiritual community, or spiritual ancestors, or recalling a moment when you were the caring figure for another, what we're doing is we're using that framework not to obsess about it or ruminate about the framework. Was I caring enough? Maybe I should feel guilty. I wasn't caring enough at that moment. Or were the other people caring enough to me? I don't know. And whatever. It's just, we use whatever it is that elicits those qualities. So now we're experiencing them. When we experience it as happening now, and that's rather crucial, not just the memory. Sometimes people will say, well, I was re-inhabiting the moment, but I wasn't feeling anything. So I have to say, I don't think you were re-inhabiting the moment. Because if you re-inhabit it as if it is happening now, you can't help feel it. So when someone says, well, I wasn't feeling it, that means you were not actually experiencing it as if it is happening now. Now, it may also not be the appropriate moment or framework for you. Then there's a need to really search for more moments. But what these practices are introducing is the recognition that it would be worthwhile to scour back through our history, through our background, and also start paying more attention than we have before to many kinds of moments of simple care. When we were object of care, when we were subject of care, when we're observing others, because it's evoking something from us, which we may not have noticed before, which is a real power of love, care, compassion, and awareness. And now we're really starting to zero in on it. Powers of our underlying awareness, which we can learn to tap into. We can familiarize with that possibility. It can become quite real. And then those powers of love, care, compassion, deep acceptance, warmth, presence can become a very stable, secure base from which, secure base, secure core from which or within which to process our own feelings, and from which to be present to others, to sense more in them than our own reactions to them, to be able to sense more in them because we have enough of a secure core ourselves to be more present to them. You following? So all these different ways, they're all just different ways to access loving qualities of our underlying awareness, our basic awareness. So now there are a bunch of questions that came in. So let me let me try to respond to those. So one question is, and all these questions are, most of them are referring to the practice we did last night, which was meditation 7, which was taking our own layers of suffering into compassion for others, into empathy and compassion for others. That's the practice we did last night. And in your handout, that's meditation 7. So the first question is just, how long will these meditations that I've been leading be available on the Barry course website for us to practice with? I think that they're going to be taken off of the Barry site at the end of this course, but those video recordings have also been put up on another website, which is the site of the other sponsoring organization, which is the main organization that I teach through, which is called Foundation for Active Compassion. And the website for that is on the first page of your handout. Right? You're all familiar with that now? I really would recommend that all of you go to that website and check it out, because so many questions are coming in that actually refer you to that website. this question is one that, well, where will the video recordings be after this course? They will be on that website, Foundation for Active Compassion. Another frequent question or implicit question is, well, I'm having this or that issue with practice. How can that be improved or helped? And one of the main responses to that is that nobody can actually learn meditation practices alone. We learn it in community with others, so that there are others who are practicing similarly, many of whom who have a lot of experience with it. We can get ongoing input. We can get support. When we have trouble or problems, there are others who have also had trouble and problems and have come through them as part of a community of practice. And that on that website is also meditation groups, which many of which are now online on Zoom. So if there's someone who is pretty seriously interested in these practices and really wants to start back up and start really exploring them, and then I have to say that it's essential actually to practice in community with others. That's true actually for all contemplative practices. No one learns them alone. Never. Even the Buddha sometimes said, well, the Buddha kind of discovered enlightenment as if by himself. But actually, if we're going to get into it, from a traditional Asian Buddhist point of view, the Buddha did not discover enlightenment, he rediscovered it. And from within traditional Asian Buddhist cosmologies, he rediscovered it because he had been introduced to it, the practices of it, in prior lives by prior Buddhas over many lifetimes. So I'm not saying that we have to, some of us may not inhabit that cosmology, that worldview, fine. But I'm saying, I am declaring, even according to Buddhist tradition, no one has ever done this alone. And that includes the Buddha. That's all I'm saying, from within their cosmology. He also had to be introduced to it, which in Asian Buddhist understanding happened for him in prior lifetimes. And that's why in his final lifetime, he could rediscover, not discover, rediscover a path he had already been introduced to before by others. So no one, including the Buddha, ever can learn to do this alone. We have to learn how to do it in community. Anyhow, is that sort of clear? So that's another resource that's on that website, is the link to online Zoom practice groups. For someone who really wants to learn to practice, they can practice with others who are with the support of that. So the next question, in the field of care meditation, sometimes the same image or memory that evoked the loving feelings previously does not bring up any feelings now. It can sometimes feel dull, even when I try to imagine that it's happening right now. So, of course, that can happen, especially when first beginning the practice. But what I would suggest is try to find more and more moments of loving connection that make you really happy to recall. If you're using a caring moment as your access point to loving qualities, try to find more moments of loving connection from your life and observe more and more of them in your days. And then explore working with various ones in this meditation practice with field of care, and see which moments like that, caring moments, are easier for you to re-inhabit as happening now, because that's crucial. So if you recall a moment of caring connection that makes you really happy to recall, that feeling of happiness upon just recalling the moment, even before re-inhabiting it, that feeling of happiness means that the loving energy is already here. That's why you feel happy when you just think of it. So you're already accessing that loving energy. And then that means you can access it further by reliving the moment, by experiencing it as if it's happening now. So sometimes someone may think they are reliving it, but aren't. Like I said before, it's actually still just the memory that you're working with. So you also need to explore that further. Explore the possibility of actually experiencing it as if it's happening now. That other person or being is with you now, in just that way. And the same questioner went on with her question, or his, and said, I noticed that the field of care practice comes more easily for me when practicing together in the group with you, John. And I imagine that the loving energy is magnified when we generate it together. So that maybe that's what's making it easier for me. So, okay, that was her further statement, or his. So now my response. This is actually a very important part of how these practices are transmitted. The teacher and the community who are very experienced in the practice are generating a loving energy, which is in fact encompassing any student, any participant who is there and who is receptive enough to resonate with that while doing the same practice together with them. You follow? So this is what a teacher is supposed to be doing, and this is what other members of the practice community with experience in the practice are supposed to be doing. That's what they are doing. That's a big part of the reason why it's so supportive to practice in community and with people who are guiding the meditation, who have a lot of experience with it. They are generating a field of care. So indeed, even as the instruction is, well, bring to mind a field of care, caring moment, benefactor, spiritual figure, whatever it is for you. Bring that to mind. But even as you're trying to do that individually, you are held in a field of care that's being generated by the teacher and all the members of the practice community who are experienced with the practice. You are held in that. And we are all held in it together by each other. So that's a whole nother dimension of field of care. Are you following? It's happening now, right in the practice. And so as you participate in the practice with the teacher and with others in the practice community who are experienced in it, and if you're receptive enough at that time, then you may resonate with that field of loving energy by entering into the practice together with them. And you also become a part of it, and you become an extension of it. And so in that way, just in coming together right from the very first practice we did together, we are all suddenly included in a field of care, which we may or may not be ready to experience consciously as such, but there it is here. And some of us may be experiencing it consciously, a sense that we're really resonating with that. We may have thought that was just our individual practice, but it wasn't. We were being held. And as we resonate with that, we are holding. And in that sense, from the very first moment we did the very first practice, field of care, our very first evening, we were already entered into a field of care in that moment, together with teacher, practice community, and we were becoming an extension of it to the degree that we were also participating in it. And therefore, all the modes were already there from the very first practice we did. We were held, and we were already participating in that field of holding, receptive mode, inclusive mode, right from the start, just like that. So, therefore, doing the practice together itself functions as a field of care for all who are participating. And we can recall that, and that can become our field of care that supports our own practice going forward. And that's why when I introduced the field of care practice, I gave these different options. You can think of a caring moment that you had. You can think of someone you're grateful has been in your life. You can think of spiritual figure, spiritual community, spiritual ancestors. And that third option is exactly this. And this is actually how it has functioned through the ages in Buddhist traditions and other spiritual traditions. So you can recall this field of care moment of practice together, and recall teachers, your spiritual community of practice together, and bring that to mind later And that can be your field of care for ongoing practice as well. Are you following? That's actually how it has worked in traditions for centuries. And that's what we have also been entered into. And that's also why ongoingly practicing in community is so crucial. And why I suggested if someone's really interested in taking up these practices and really exploring them over time, then you do need to connect with practice community. And that's provided in our current pandemic condition. There are quite a number of online practice groups who practice these practices, led by people who have been practicing these practices often for many years. Some of whom are here with us, here, now, holding us all in the loving energy of the practice. Some of them here now. You following? And that's how it works. And then as we enter into it, we are holding. We're not just being held, we're also participating in a field of holding. That is the basic pattern of these kinds of spiritual traditions that I referred to from the very first talk I gave 6 weeks ago. We have been entered into it. We are participating in it. That is how it works. We are part of it to the degree we wish to be, continue to be. Just to share one further broader perspective on this, but please don't freak out. It's a big perspective. I'll say it's my perspective, but it's my perspective because it's a very traditional perspective, and I sort of got enculturated into it. But it is how I experience things now. Everyone through all the ages, from the Buddha himself up to now, who awakened to these powers of love, compassion, and awareness, and all their qualities. Everyone who's ever awakened, what is it that they awakened to? They awakened to this great, all-inclusive holding in love and compassion of all beings. That's what awakening means. So all those who have awakened before us and around us through the ages have been and are holding us in unconditional love, compassion, and wisdom. It has not stopped. Just because perhaps we have not noticed that does not mean that it is not happening. And these practices, part of their function is to help us notice it. We are held already in all-pervasive, all-inclusive, unconditional care, compassion, awareness. We are held in that. And that's also, for me at least, part of the effect of these meditations is that it sensitizes me to become more aware of that. That I, but not just me, the whole world around me is already held in what I am seeking myself to awaken to more and more. Are you following? So that's like the big picture. Now we're not just talking about the couple hundred people here at any given time. We're talking about how it has worked through the ages and the larger scope of it all. And that basic understanding also is not only Buddhist, but is also shared with other traditions. We are held in a great power of care, compassion, and wisdom beyond what we have yet noticed. And the practices that we do help us to begin to notice it or realize, oh my gosh, that's what's been going on. I was held in a field of care long before I realized that was happening. And I now have the opportunity to participate in that great holding. I could learn to be part of that as well. That's the pattern that I'm talking about, both within Buddhism and within other traditions, that often is not so focused upon, noticed in the modern kind of age that we live in now. And yet, that's actually how these practices work, the practices that we've inherited, even in this adapted form. So then comes another question. Someone says, I am a visual person and my meditations are accompanied by images. So that's great. Then he goes further. She says, for example, releasing frameworks is accompanied by an image of scaffolding falling away. And I visualize my heart as I feel it beating. The emotions I sit with become specific images. I don't think about these images, they just come. Should I strive to meditate without these images? That's the question. Did everybody hear the question? It's really interesting, isn't it? So that just sounds great. I love that. Like that, what he or she just said, when releasing the frameworks, like in the releasing phase of these meditations, there's an image of scaffolding falling away. That's really great. I love that. But what I want to say is that it's fine during the meditation for these images to be happening. Absolutely. They're probably some inner pattern within you for accessing and connecting. What I would say is that at the releasing phase itself, and do all of you understand what I mean by that now? That's the last phase of each meditation. We just let go of the framework. We let go of envisioning or recalling or re-inhabiting anything and just let the mind kind of reunite with its underlying utter openness and simplicity. That's the releasing phase. At that phase, it's time to just let go of all images. If images are coming, just let them come and go, but don't hold on to them. Or if at the releasing phase, as you said, an image comes up like scaffolding falling away, which is really beautiful, then experience that image in a way that finally lets go of all images. Let that scaffolding, so you have this image of scaffolding falling away at the releasing phase. Then let that image help you to finally let go of all images and just relax into the basic openness and simplicity of awareness, beyond holding on to anything. Then if any further thoughts, feelings, perceptions, images arise, and just let them unwind, release in their own way. You're not identifying with, not holding on. Just be that openness that lets everything fall away as it arises. That's the releasing phase. That also is kind of the letting be of mind meditation. And that's what introduces us to the basic openness, simplicity, clarity, and compassionate capacity of our underlying awareness, or you could say our Buddha nature. And someone was asking, when you guided us in the field of care meditation during the first session, I looked at my spiritual teacher's photo and burst into tears, feeling her presence as unconditional love and compassion. But as the weeks have passed since the first session we met, that experience has become less emotionally warm and sometimes feels dry. So is this dryness a part of me that's resisting and that needs to be delved into? But then even as I write this, it seems like maybe it's just something that needs to be held in love and acceptance, like all aspects of my experience. So my response is that when you realize, basically, part of what we're developing through the practice is a better and better understanding of how it functions. And when we understand how the field of care practice functions, we can cooperate with it better. So it's not quite so mysterious, and we're not so dependent on something outside of us to somehow get us to someplace. We're recognizing how we're using it to access something within us. So when you realize that the field of care's function is to evoke the loving qualities from your own awareness, then it can help you to use the field of care in that way. You can have increasing confidence that you can reconnect with those loving qualities under the surface of your conscious awareness with a little help from a caring moment or a spiritual field. And as you understand better through repeated practice, it can become easier to access what is always readily available under the surface of your mind. That is, these loving capacities are always available right under the surface of your mind, just below the surface of all our familiar habits of thinking, and constantly thinking and thinking and thinking in familiar ways about familiar things, and reacting in familiar ways again and again. Just under the surface of that, these loving capacities are already available. And the moment that that surface level of thinking and reacting is interrupted by something that evokes these underlying caring capacities, then the caring capacities are right here, just like that. So as we catch on to that, we realize, oh, that's how the field of care functions. It's no longer such a mystery. We realize that we're using it. We can develop more and more understanding and confidence. Oh yes, I can use that to just interrupt what's holding back these underlying loving capacities and just let them come out. And it can get easier and easier, but that requires familiarizing, repetition, and again, importantly, practice within a practice community with others with lots of experience in the practice. So we keep getting input that just helps us learn to do that better, because others around us have learned to do that. That's crucial to our development. We're all kind of like, and don't take this the wrong way, this is really just a psychological dimension of what we're doing, but we're all like small children who are scaffolding on a loving parent. We are all like that. We never grew out of that. So we're scaffolding on embodied care that resonates with our own capacity of care and brings it out. And we learn how to cooperate with that process better and better. And that's profoundly supported by being surrounded by others or practicing with others who are similarly learning how to be held and to hold beings in that kind of embodied care. That's how things unfold. I really do get the feeling now in these questions, in many of them, that it's the understandable question of someone who's trying to practice pretty much on their own, and trying, very sincerely to try to get a handle on it. But we don't really get as much of a handle on it as we want just by trying to do it on our own. So of course we've been meeting once a week, but I'm also introducing new practices each week. So the way this really works is you do the same practice, the one that's most connecting for you. For many people, that's one of the first 3 meditations, field of care or yourself as caring figure, whatever. And you do it a ton, you just do it a lot, and with the support of others who've been doing it a lot. And that establishes a kind of a secure core of caring, compassionate qualities and awareness from which you can do all the other practices. Gradually, they start to unfold, again, with the support of others practicing with you and ongoing teaching input. That's how it works. I feel like maybe for some of you, feel like you're struggling out there on your own, trying to sort this out. And I think it's really time to signal that it doesn't have to be quite that much of a struggle, because we're all supporting each other in the practice. So anyone who wants to, whatever practice you take up, if mindfulness, meditation, deeply prayerful, contemplative life, whatever practice you may take up, contemplative practice, then you're entering into some kind of a community of practice that's mutually supportive and that you become a part of and a supportive part of for others. That's always how it works. So someone was asking about last night's meditation. They said during last night's meditation, which was meditation 7, which is taking our own suffering feelings or layers of suffering into empathy and compassion for others. You all remember that from last night? So this person is asking, after much difficulty, I finally accessed the field of care. So please make note of that. I mean, speaking now to the questioner, if she or he is here, your phrasing there, after much difficulty, I finally accessed the field of care. So that's an indication at the start of that meditation on then becoming conscious of our own painful feeling, that the secure base that's necessary to feel safe in becoming aware of our own painful feeling is not very well established. And that's what's really needed for meditation 7 to be done, effectively. So that's why typically people do a lot of practice, field of care type practice in one of the first 3 meditations, and also compassionate presence to feelings, which is meditation 4, quite a lot, typically, before they regularly do this meditation 7, where we consciously and intentionally become newly conscious of some kind of suffering or painful feeling in us, but in a way that feels safe to us, with that, like, we really can. That's part of the joy of the practice. Oh my gosh, I actually can. I didn't realize I could, because there's a secure enough base in these loving qualities that we can. Anyhow, so to continue with the question, after much difficulty, I finally accessed the field of care, but then connected my feeling of fear. And when I included others who were feeling fear, I just became overwhelmed and stayed like that. I became overwhelmed and stayed overwhelmed. So what happened? What did I miss in the practice? So my response is, what was missing is that in the instruction, after recognizing that your own painful feeling is shared with many others, the instruction says, oh, you realize that this feeling is not just my own. It's a feeling like what many others feel. Once you've made that empathetic connection, then you let the loving energies from your field of care embrace all of your painful feelings in spacious compassion. And you let that compassionate energy come through you to all the others who experience similar painful feelings. So now your attention is now directed by the instruction outward, not inward, outward, toward others who experience this kind of painful feeling. So your own painful feeling has served as a stepping stone to sense from within the kinds of difficulty that many others feel. And now your attention is drawn outward by the loving energy, radiating to them all, strongly wishing them deeply well and free, and oriented toward their freedom from those kinds of sufferings. Your own painful feeling has put you in that position of deep care and compassion for them, understanding from within, at least to some degree, how it must feel. All that was missing in your description. And that's not unusual, because the practice was just introduced. You probably didn't hear all of it. Things happen while trying to engage it. But you can look at the handout now and see that there's much more to it. But really, most importantly, what you wrote implies that you are not familiar enough yet with establishing a secure base in loving qualities. And that's essential and assumed in order to really engage this practice of becoming aware of our own difficult feelings, willing to become aware of them because we feel safe enough to become aware of them. And that has to be real, we can't fake it. And that comes from having established enough of a secure base in loving and compassionate qualities in ourselves through the earlier practices that we realize, oh my gosh, that's really real. There is a tremendous power of safety and protection here in love and compassion. It's real. When we really sense that, now we're ready for this next meditation. And another person also asked a really good question. Is there a trick to remembering to reconnect with this secure base or core of love and compassion? I seem to go whole entire days without remembering to reconnect with it. You follow the question? I seem to go whole days without remembering to reconnect with it. So what I would say to that is that we do need to do the practice quite a lot to get used to reconnecting with it. So it becomes kind of a habit to reconnect with it. And here again, sorry to be so repetitive, but it is to the point. Practicing together in a practice community regularly is a crucial support for that. Because we come together with others and that reminds us of the power of the practice. So again, there are practice groups that are practicing these meditations weekly, and their links to them are available on the Foundation for Active Compassion website. So I think those practice groups are actually quite important for quite a number of people here who are asking these questions, because that's an important part of the answer to these questions. Being together with others, practicing, and being able to ask ongoing these and other questions ongoingly. It's such a support. Another tremendous support is immersing oneself in a retreat. Because in a retreat, we just immerse in the practices. We just keep coming back to them and reconnecting them throughout the whole retreat. Sensing through that how each practice, first of all, we take much more time and repeatedly do each practice, and then sense how it's related and connected to other practices and how they unfold from that one. And we immerse in that for a period of some days in retreat. And that really helps us get into synchrony with what it's like to have a regular practice for our life outside of retreat. It's really a retreat practice that has modeled for me how to be outside of retreat. That is to keep reconnecting with practice outside of retreat. So in that way, retreats can be extremely supportive. And if we never do a retreat for a few days on practice, at least a few days, we never have that model of repeatedly reconnecting as the normal way to be. But once we have that model, and if we take that into our ordinary life, and that's how I try to practice in ordinary life, I just repeatedly reconnecting. Increasingly, ordinary life becomes kind of like a retreat, but it's not a retreat away from life. It's like a retreat within life in the sense that you keep reconnecting with powers of care, love, compassion, acceptance, which process your own feelings and from which you're with others. And when you're thrown off balance, you keep reconnecting with it as you can. No big pressure, very relaxed, but you never stop that. You just keep reconnecting. Then everything unfolds from that. And that brings us to the next question, which is, can you please distinguish how this 6-day course that you're going to be offering in June differs from what we are learning here in this 7-week course? So that's really what I was just saying. So the 6-day thing that I'm going to offer in June, from June 12th to 18th, and information for that is also on that same website, Foundation for Active Compassion. It's not a course, it's a retreat. So the questioner is asking, can you distinguish how that course is different from this course? But the June 12th to 18th event that I'm leading, I'll be co-teaching it with others who are really experienced and wonderful teachers, but that's a retreat. It's not just a course. So what does that mean? A retreat is different from a weekly course that's just 1 hour, a 1 hour session or two in a week. In a retreat, we just keep immersing in the practice together, helping each other in that. There's a growing power of the practice in retreat with the teachers and with all the other practitioners as a deep support, a deeply supportive community of mutual support and blessing. So we go into further depth with each practice than we possibly could in an hour a week. There's much more chance to ask questions live and hear a direct response that informs deepening practice over the days. There's a much fuller processing of what these practices are raising for each of us with other practitioners together in retreat. It goes way beyond what we're experiencing here. A weekly course does not provide that kind of retreat container. A weekly course where we're just meeting an hour a week. So from the first session, I suggested it would be important to try to reconnect with these practices throughout the day as best you can. But I know that that didn't happen for many people very much, because it's a retreat environment that models that reconnecting again and again throughout the day. And once that's been imprinted through a retreat, then we know what that could be like in our ordinary days, in ordinary life. But a course like this, maybe the teacher says, okay, really important to try to reconnect with it throughout your day as many times as you can. But how many of us were really doing that? I imagine some of us really were, but some of us were really not. I can tell by some of the questions. Okay, but that's also totally understandable. We need support for that. It's not a matter of an individual up against it all, really trying to get it together. It just doesn't work that way. It unfolds very naturally with the right support. That's how it works. Practicing together with others, doing a retreat when we can. No pressure, but just that's how it works. So then someday, maybe when there's an opportunity, we know that's how it works. We could do that. Someone's asking, recently I realized that if I purposely look outward, or lifting my attention toward others, it helps resolve my own self-involvement, and I find it healing to me. How does that relate to this training? It seems a little confusing to me because it seems like I'm starting in the wrong place by focusing on others rather than being receptive to the qualities of love that I experience within a field of care. But it still feels right to me. So what I would say to that is, yeah, absolutely. Different individuals are different with how we best enter into this, how we enter into a kind of a training in which each of the practices are empowering and informing each other. So our abilities to receive love and to extend love to others are mutually empowering and informing. I'll repeat that. Our ability to receive love, to experience that we are held in love, and to extend love to others are mutually informing and empowering. But we can enter into that process from either side of it. So you may find the practice that we just did tonight, oneself as caring figure, as your most accessible way of establishing a field of care in which you are the caring figure for another. And in that, by reliving that, experiencing the loving qualities available in your awareness, triggered by that field of care, you as the caring figure for another, happening now, feeling those qualities. That may be your best entry point to begin all these practices. Or you can start the practice with the inclusive mode with a focus on extending care to others in the way you're describing. But then I do suggest that we let that help empower also the other receptive mode practices. Experiment over time also with whatever framework is most engaging for you of becoming receptive to being held in care, such as a caring moment or being with someone you're grateful has been in your life, or spiritual community or spiritual figure. It'll be important to let whichever practice is most initially effective to enter you into the whole process, to let that practice further open the process and not shut any of it out in some final way. Oh, I'm just the kind of person who extends care to others. I can't receive care. Don't do that to yourself. Maybe right now it's a bit more challenging. Later, maybe not. Every part of these practices is empowering the other parts. When we're aware of that, we can become open to that, the possibility that we could change. We could open more to what's here. We can notice that we are held by others. And that's another way of giving something to others, to be willing to let them hold us in care, since that's also an important part of their development. That's another way of extending care to others, to be willing to receive their care. Not shut them out, not shut it out. But that's also a learning for all of us. It's not just some command we're supposed to follow. It's a process of learning that we can become more and more open, receptive, connected, more resonant with the fuller reality here, piece by piece. If we keep open to those possibilities of developing and transforming. Okay, maybe last question. This is a technical one, but is this meditation 7 we did last night, that's taking our own suffering, layers of suffering, into empathy and compassion for others, is that meditation based on Tonglen? Since all these meditations are being adapted from Tibetan Buddhism, someone's asking, Tonglen is a practice in Tibetan Buddhism, quite common nowadays. Is that practice based on Tonglen? So it's actually adapted from a fuller set of practices called Lojong, which means mind-heart training, which include Tonglen, but are not only Tonglen. The fuller set of practices around Tonglen. Yeah. And also, from this kind of training, Tonglen also, for those who have been introduced to it or become familiar with it, can unfold more and more freely. More of the foundations of what becomes Tonglen are established through this kind of training. Then Tonglen can unfold very naturally. It's not so much of a struggle. It's just the further unfolding of actually all these practices, which themselves are adapted from Lojong traditions, and also some of the patterns of tantric practice traditions, which is what Lojong is also embedded in, and Tonglen too. Okay, but that was sort of technical. So if you're not familiar with all those Tibetan terms, don't worry about it. Okay, we're at the end of our time. So thank you all. It's a huge sacrifice. You're not watching young Sheldon or Father Brown tonight, who are on TV. Instead, you came here to be with me and with each other. So I really appreciate that great sacrifice on your part. I'm only half joking. Okay, great to see you all. Bye-bye.